All right. 800 people, as you know, have died as a result of the virus in Victoria. And it was hotel quarantine's job, one job, to keep the virus contained, a role they didn't do, and it's all genomically linked back to this government failure. The Andrews government hired security guards, as you know, 3 firms, and one of them in particular, Unified Security, is the focus of my discussions now. And Unified Security, of course, were not on the preferred tenders list. Not on the preferred tenders list. They were responsible for the Ridges Hotel on Swanson in Carlton, which was the source of one of the largest outbreaks of COVID-19. Senior reporter with the Daily Telegraph, John Rolfe, has been investigating Unified Security. He joins me now from Sydney. John,
G'day,
you
Peter.
first wrote about Unified Security back in July. I know I've gone back and read and reread many times over what you wrote then, before any of us really understood the significance of the outbreak being linked to hotel security. But this firm in particular, what can you tell us about the company?
Well, they're not the type of people that you should be giving more than $40 million to virtually unchecked. That's what I found, Peter. You're talking about, and you said in your intro to tonight's show, that it's led by a colourful character. I think that's an apt description. The majority shareholder of Unified Security, he's one of the best connected people in Sydney, and he earned these connections through running the security at King's Cross nightclubs, at providing the security for the Manly Seagulls Rugby League Club. And whilst he might have first-grade connections, it certainly hasn't been a first-grade performance. The 49% shareholder is a gentleman by the name of Luigi Trunzo, who imported or tried to import bulletproof glass into Australia in the 1990s. Each of them have been in charge of 2 failed companies, and Unified itself has risen from the ashes twice. The first time, it sold all of its physical assets back to itself for $20,000, including all its cabinets, computers and 4 Glock pistols. And the second time, its creditors, and the taxpayers chief among them, owed $1.1 million, got less than 4 cents on the dollar. So these are the roosters who were put in charge of the Victorian hotel quarantine, and they've proven that they're not up to the job. I'm sure that they've meant well, but when you haven't been vetted, this is the type of problem that arises.
Yeah, just on that point about not being vetted, and I hope people could follow the evidence that I went through over the last couple of days as I went through it tonight on air. I mean, they get a $30 million contract in 6 hours flat. There doesn't appear to be any probity in the agreement by the Department Secretary of the Jobs Department, a guy called Simon Femister, in signing that off. They get ahead of the game. MSS Security and Wilson Security, they are on the vetted list. They don't even get a look in. And Unified gets the job on the very first night in the very first hotel that quarantine starts in Victoria. And they get the lion's share of the work. And the guy, David Millward, who you just spoke about there, well, he doesn't even give evidence in the Coate inquiry. He does not give oral evidence at all in the Coate inquiry. And you've got a litany of other people now who have got different evidence in one inquiry as they've given Coate. We've had the Chief of the Premier's Department now resign. We've got other people with serious questions over how they've acted in this process. How concerned would you be that this mob gets something where they're not checked, they get it in 6 hours flat, and it's $30 million?
Well, you know better than most, Peter, how proper government should run, and this is not the way it's run. What is the point of having a vetted list if you're not going to turn to the people on the vetted list in a time of crisis, when you need to act swiftly, decisively, and with confidence? Why go outside that? Well, the only insight that we have is that Unified Security is classified as an Indigenous-owned business because Mr. Millward has Indigenous heritage, and to qualify as being Indigenous-owned, you have to only be 51% owned by someone with Indigenous heritage. He's not, in fact, the director of Unified Security, but there is an Indigenous director of Unified Security. He came on at the start of the COVID crisis. He's the brother of a Parramatta Eels great, and so I suppose that gives him a little bit more Indigenous credibility. The Victorian Andrews government has a preferred tender status for an inclusion policy that means that 1% of all of this expenditure has to go to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander companies. And that was certainly discussed, has come out in the evidence as a consideration as to why Unified got the nod ahead of those on the vetted list. Make of that what you will.
I know that's, John, I know that's been talked about, but that is a red herring. So that everyone in the media thinks that's the real reason. The more I have dug and the more the good Labor people have told me, I'm telling you, it's a lot smellier than all of that. I want to go to your story today. Really interesting story about the polling company Ucoms, paid by left-leaning think tank, the Australia Institute, to quiz voters on mining and the environment in the New South Wales Nationals-held seat of Bathurst. But they made a big error, didn't they?
They sure did, and I know this because I got a call, and I don't live in Bathurst. I got a call, this robocall from Ucoms, and Ucoms was set up just last year by the union movement to be their polling division. And this poll was going to, I guess, try and find out what people in the Bathurst electorate thought about some mining environment issues in the Lithgow area, which is part of that electorate. Problem was that instead of calling a seat where you would have found a lot of Nationals voters, they polled the greenest seat in all of New South Wales, Newtown, which is where I happen to live. And it's just, I mean, how on earth can you have any credibility when you can't even get the sampling right? Initially, when I raised this with the Australia Institute, they point blank denied that they'd even conducted such a poll. But when I sent them the audio of the robocall, they reconsidered and admitted, yes, it had been, in fact, conducted and stuffed up entirely. I just, it totally undermines a lot of what they might say.
And people at home hear me say this often, John Rolfe, I don't think I trust any polling anymore, here or overseas. Thank you, as always. Great analysis, and I'll be going back for everything you write from here on in on unified security. Thanks, John Rolfe.
Thanks.